Well, our special guest is heading to Atlanta in the Sweet 16 with the University of Michigan basketball team. Radio play-by-play voice Brian Boesch. He joins us here on 3 Point Podcast. Welcome, Brian. And first question, I guess, is what went through your mind when the horn sounded on Saturday night in that win over A&M?
Well, Ted, Matt, Jared, appreciate you all having me on. A lot, because that was the 1-year anniversary of FAU's loss in overtime to Northwestern in the first round last year. And so much of the 2024 season was thinking about where this program was going to go. We did not know about Juwan Howard's status until the very end of the season, and I credit Ward Manuel for allowing that team to finish that season as frustrating as it was. Yeah. The health storyline was a very real one, but it was impossible as that season was going on to think anything differently than, okay, how does Michigan get back? And is Juwan Howard the person who can do it? Right. Then the announcement happens, Juwan gets fired. Relieved of his duties is probably a more
mutual parting of ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Kinder words.
Exactly. And Dusty May was, I think, on the top of most people's lists, and there were obviously some high-profile openings that were there or potentially there with Ohio State. So for Michigan to act swiftly and get him was phenomenal. And to think about the changes over the course of that year, it all kind of just came into mind in that, the whole concept of like life flashing before your eyes, right? Like the last year kind of flashes before your eyes, and you hear the stat, this is the 6th consecutive time that Michigan's made the NCAA tournament that they've been in the Sweet 16. Not many programs do that with an 8-24 season sprinkled in. So for this program to do it, for those who stayed to have been a part of the Renaissance, the 1-year Renaissance, I think that's where kind of my head went to. And then statistically, the rebounds, that was where my mind went to in the vacuum of that game, because it was Michigan's best performance on the glass. And frankly, I don't even know what the number 2 one is. It was that good.
Maybe the turnovers. They did kind of keep their turnovers down a little bit. So
they did. Yeah, but the nice thing was, Matt, that they did do that for 2 of the 3 games in the Big Ten tournament as well. We've seen that it's possible, right? But when you face the best rebounding team in the country and you outboard them by 9, they hadn't lost the offensive rebounding battle since mid-January, and Michigan won it. And that was just not the case, because the 2 teams I saw from the Big Ten and Texas A&M terrified me in the prep. It was Michigan State and Illinois.
Yep.
And those games did not go well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we all know Michigan has some struggles when it comes to turnovers that can be frustrating to watch as a fan. I'm sure even while you're calling the game is a little frustrating. Another turnover by Michigan. That can probably be a little frustrating, but they've cleaned things up and they're back in the Sweet 16 coming off a Big Ten tournament championship. So, hey, whatever frustrations we had at the end of the season, they've definitely turned it around. And at work, obviously at my work, it's a lot of SEC fans, but people have been saying, do you think they can make a Final Four? Do you think they could win a national championship? And I was like, honestly, obviously national championship, who knows? A lot of things have to come out right, but you're in the Sweet 16. I mean, why not? I've watched a lot of Auburn this year. Obviously Auburn is the overall number 1 seed for a reason. Jani Broome is no joke. He could be National Player of the Year. There's no reason that Michigan can't beat them, though, right? I mean, they have the way Vlad Golden is playing, the way Danny Wolf can play. Trey Donaldson has come up big. They can beat anyone, I think. I mean, a lot of things have to play out right. But do you kind of see it that way? Obviously, you've watched a lot of Michigan. I don't know if you all would call yourself a Michigan fan, but,
absolutely.
From the analyst standpoint, could you see Michigan beating the overall number 1 seed in Auburn?
Yeah, I think you can take that a couple ways. One, once you get to this point, and really, I think once you get to the round of 32, you throw the seeds out. I mean, Texas A&M was a really good team. They were a 4 seed, and you compare and contrast to Auburn. Texas A&M just beat Auburn. Now, that does not mean the transitive property is going to show up, because that's not how it works. But I think once you get to this stage, it is all about matchups. The seeds can get thrown out the window. Here's what I'd say about when you look at a 5 in front of Michigan's name and a 1 in front of Auburn's name. If Roddy Gale Jr. plays the way that he played against Texas A&M,
Mm.
you could put a 1 by Michigan seed.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Michigan needed a wing player to deliver. Now, I'm not expecting 4 threes and 26 points from Roddy
Right.
Gale Jr., but what I think is fair to expect is how he asserted himself on that initial drive to the basket, how he went 8 of 8 from the free throw line,
Yep.
and that he took threes confidently. Because something that's overlooked in that game against Texas A&M, Dusty May talked about this pregame and a little bit postgame. He just has confidence that this team will find a way, and he doesn't know exactly how it's going to happen. Michigan's 3-point percentage was about what we expect this year.
Right.
They have not shot better than 40% since the Penn State game, the Trey Donaldson comeback late. Everybody else on Michigan had 2 total threes. So it just kind of ebbed and flowed to where it was Roddy's turn. Maybe it's Ruben on Friday night or Namari. Who knows what it'll be. But seeds can get thrown out. And at this stage of the game, if Michigan is playing the way that they did against Texas A&M, yeah. Am I going to sit here and say, oh, yeah, they can win the national championship? Sure, they can. They're 1 of 16.
Yep.
But do I believe they can beat Auburn? Yes. Do I think
Sure.
they should be the underdog? Absolutely.
Right.
Yes. Auburn is excellent, and a team's good when their struggle, quote unquote, down the stretch was 3-3 over the last 6,
Right.
and their Ken Pom rankings have gone from all time to just like, oh, they're just number 4 in the country.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's where we are. That's how good Auburn is. That's how good they are.
Yep.
But if Michigan's playing like they did against Texas A&M, like they did against Purdue, Maryland, and really that second half against Wisconsin, first half was pretty ugly offensively. Yeah, they can match up with anybody. Doesn't mean they're going to be favored, but shoot, I think the UC San Diego game is the only game they've been favored in these last 5 games, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And they were the popular upset pick. It's probably pretty close to 50-50 in the bracket. So that those types of stories aren't impossible, but hey, remember FAU was a Lamont Butler shot away from playing for the national championship.
Right.
Once you get to this point, anything can. 2018, Loyola Chicago, they were an 11 seed. NC State last year. The matchups are there, and let's put it this way. If they beat Auburn, they can win the national championship because Auburn's one of the best teams in the country.
Yep.
2-part question. I think about a radio play-by-play guy. I mean, right now it's got to be just the dream life. You're going to Colorado, now you're heading to Atlanta. 1, how much fun is it following this team on a run like this? And 2, heading into last weekend, are you surprised that you're still working, or did you think you'd be on vacation by now?
I'll hit the second part first. Going into Indianapolis, I really believed, even with the 3-game losing streak, and maybe this is the maize and blue infiltrating here, I really believed they could beat Purdue because Purdue was like Michigan, not finishing all that well.
Right.
And then I wanted, from a win standpoint, I wanted Maryland because I was worried about the Illinois matchup. And then I said, well, hey, once you get to the championship game, anything can happen. So it felt feasible to me, right? I wasn't picking Michigan to go and win that. You lose 3 straight by 43 points. You're not thinking that they're going to go and win 3 games in 42 hours.
Right.
And I was very worried about the UC San Diego matchup. I was worried about A&M for Michigan to, kind of, I don't know what, chameleon-like fit the issues that these teams could do to Michigan, and at least they won it against A&M. I think they kind of held serve from a turnover standpoint against UC San Diego. It wasn't a good performance, but it wasn't a bad one. And when you're a 5 seed in that spot, just don't invite them. They did in the second half, but it wasn't because of turnovers, right? It was because of some failed execution offensively, and time a guy went off. To answer your first question, yeah, I mean this is what we do it for. It's an opportunity to call these types of big moments, to cherish the memories with these young men who, Terry Mills is the best person I've ever worked with. He is so fun to call these games with. And he's always talked about this, in 1989, he didn't have anywhere close to the appreciation for what that team accomplished, for the fact that team shocked the world, but now he does. It has grown over time.
Right.
It really has, I always think of this. I don't know if you all have seen the show Squid Games, right?
In sports,
like your season's livelihood goes into just these 50-50 situations, and you go into that arena, and I had confidence Michigan was going to get it done, but I know everybody wearing Texas A&M stuff had that same confidence.
Oh yeah.
And then they lose, and the season's over, and it makes you appreciate. I think Scott Van Pelt put it perfectly. In the NCAA tournament, you're watching 40 minutes just to hope you get another 40 minutes.
Right.
And then if you stack enough of those up, you win a national championship. But it's really hard to appreciate what you get a chance to call or get a chance to watch as fans. Because we knew, I mean, this time last year, I genuinely wondered when we would be back in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
Before the hire of Dusty May, I thought making the Big Ten tournament would have been a positive step forward, because if these rules were in there last year, Michigan would have been eliminated from the Big Ten tournament in February.
Right.
So when you put into that perspective, it's tough not to appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the last thing on that, Jared, I think the most fun I've had about this team is that really the culture's real. I tried to talk about it a little bit last year without, I'm in a unique, I consider myself more of a liaison. I'm not a reporter. I'm a liaison. I have to, I don't get my paychecks from Michigan, but I get my paychecks from a company that gets their paychecks from Michigan.
Right.
So I have to be careful about that. But I think you could tell in my broadcasting and my podcasting, last year's culture wasn't there. There were a number of reasons for it, some fair, some not. This team in 12 months and 5 days or whatever it is, has built a culture that can last. And that doesn't mean this roster is going to look exactly the same as it will next year, because it doesn't. But I also think that means even if it's year one, Dusty May said since April, hey, we're trying to win.
Right.
And when you get to this point, expectations change. We will look at this year in 5-10 years and fully appreciate it. But every single person in that locker room, they look at this as an opportunity. And if you are in the Sweet 16, you have an opportunity to do something special. You go to a Final Four and beyond. You got to take advantage of it. Expectations change, and that's because of the culture they've been able to build.
Well, we're testing you here because I'm going to throw a two-parter at you too, Brian. One has to do with the team, and it kind of segues into what you're talking about right there. Early on in the season, you got the new coach coming in, trying to change culture. I won't really say struggle, but they had 3 losses by 5 points early on in the season. Your perspective, seeing that and how they evolved to where they are now, that's one question. And the other question is really a diss towards the NCAA. We've had our issues with them, not only in football, but in basketball. Why on earth do they open up a transfer portal? You lose a guy like Pippen, coaches and schools have to deal with this. And then you got coaches that are able to take other jobs while they're still in the tournament. Thoughts on both of those?
I'll start with the close games. If you truly even this out, Michigan probably shouldn't have 13 wins by 4 points or less. That's really tough to do.
Yeah. It's never been done.
No, literally, yeah. It's
right.
Who can forget? What is it? 86 Bradley. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. But I do think that there were some battle scars that came from those games. And, I always kind of shied away. There was that storyline around late December. Oh, Michigan could be undefeated.
Right.
Michigan could have beaten Wake Forest. Michigan had a rally fall short against Arkansas, where if that game is 45 minutes, Michigan wins that game. I think the game that really emboldened this team to figure things out was Oklahoma. That game was it was one of the most shocking, quick losses I've ever seen. Sometimes you see a big lead just slow, and you're trying to grasp on to the last bar of the ladder before you fall. And this was, oh, hey, good basketball game. Worst that can happen here is we go to overtime. Oh, 4-point play, miss a shot, game over. Wait, we lost? and that was a I think it was an interesting aspect because it did turn the tide for these close games. But what I appreciated about it was that was I think one of the, as I learned Dusty May and his cadence, his processes, all of it. That was an instant. I got down to the locker room, and the the most unique part of my job is to do the post game interview. After wins, it's really easy. I could say, "Hey, coach, basketball, huh? How about that?" And he could talk. In a loss, especially like that, I need to come up with some sort of question that isn't just like, "Well, that was BS, huh?"
Right.
And he, yeah, it's the only part of my job that I ever am like, yeah, I deserve a little bit of sympathy. Everything else is like, Brian, people complain about travel. I'm like, I love the travel's great. This is great.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's unique, right? Like sideline reporters on TV don't interview. I always appreciate like the national championship game loser getting interviewed by, normally it's Tracy Wolfson, does a great job, because that's not very common, right? It's normally, hey, we're going to talk to Dusty May and Roddy Gale Jr. and then shuffle everybody off the floor so that we can have Wisconsin BYU.
Right.
And Dusty and the assistants, you could tell that loss pained them. But I happened to get down there before Dusty was ready to talk. Just circumstantial, got down there quick, and he took a little bit more time because again, it slipped away very quickly. And it was a constructive conversation among the assistants and Dusty. It was a passionate one. No yelling, screaming, just being mad that they let an opportunity slip away. But how do they fix it? And I don't know what of that conversation distilled into where Michigan got here. And it's not as simple as that. But I do think in particular that Oklahoma game where it can just slip away in a moment's notice was really staggering. It was truly staggering.
Mm-hmm.
Ted, I talked so long. What was your second question?
About the NCAA transfer portal, coaches moving on.
So what I'll say about this is, I mean, look at, nothing's going to be perfect. And a lot of people, rightly so, criticize the NCAA for the South bracket. It's amazing that you can have a completely wrong seed with Michigan and it be like the fourth thing wrong with the bracket in the South. It could have been Louisville against Auburn and Lexington, the number one seed. That's inexcusable. North Carolina making the NCAA tournament was inexcusable.
Right.
And you know what? You know who got screwed most of all from a team standpoint? UC San Diego. They had no business having to play Michigan. That team deserved better.
Right.
They were a 30-win team that didn't just win, but dominated their conference. They won 15 straight, 13 by double digits. And you face the team with the fourth most quad one wins in the country?
Right.
Yes, Michigan got screwed too, but UC San Diego got more screwed. So that's my preamble to the NCAA portion. Where I think the NCAA misses on this, and I think they miss a lot on some stuff. They do some things well too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to knock the NCAA.
Right.
But the NFL is king at making every portion of their calendar as relevant as it can be.
It's year round now. I mean, you care about the NFL year round now.
Think about, Matt, the schedule for college versus the NFL, right? In college, for football, you announce a game that's 10 years from now.
Right.
And in the NFL, you have a whole weekend. We have a reveal. There's conversations on television shows. Think about the NFL draft. Why is the NFL draft so popular? Because it is at a barren wasteland of football. It is late April. We are dying to talk about somebody's three-point stance.
Right.
And we get it. If you had the transfer portal for football, for basketball, for any sport, if you had it, I don't know, maybe around when a semester ends, call it May. I know, crazy. College sports would be in the conversation. It would be fair to everybody, and it would generate interest. Now you are taking away the spotlight from the best 15 games you're supposed to have during a season so that you can say, oh, well, hey, look at this center from the West Coast Conference.
Right.
And hey, I'm going to look at the center from the West Coast Conference, right? I'm going to do it. But it drops away when you do it at this point, right? Major League Baseball doesn't have free agency during the World Series. They wait till a few days after. Keep the conversation going, but spread it out.
Right.
And to me, it's just such a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's
the Yeah, well, the one just like that makes it. I'm definitely with you guys and Ted. We've talked about this on the podcast a number of times. We just don't understand football, even though it's kind of confusing when they open the transfer portal window during the college football playoff. You can somewhat justify it. It still doesn't make sense. Somewhat justify it because they say these are student athletes and they need to get to their new school before that winter semester begins. So that's the one where you're like, okay, if a kid is going to transfer, before the winter semester, he needs to enroll into Michigan State, wherever before the winter semester. So that's the one where I guess that makes sense. But it's still like Michigan had a couple guys transfer this year and they're like, while they're still going to play in their bowl game and all that kind of stuff. So that's the one where football, I guess you can kind of justify it, but it still doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's fair, Matt. I think where you can look at it is, hey, let's just create 2 windows, one in the winter, one in the spring, around the semester end.
Right.
And pick the one for each sport that is away from the postseason.
Yeah.
Because
but then the winter wouldn't be away from football. Football players would have to wait till the spring, and then
that's
spring
what I'm
ball
saying.
is already gone.
Yeah.
Right?
So for me, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
For waiting for the spring, because then they will have had a whole year, right?
Yeah.
The problem is when you open up the can that this has with revenue sharing, NIL, transfer portal, it's really hard to put it back in. And that's where I just think, the NCAA does an incredible job running March Madness. Every little detail is thought through to execute this tournament.
You can only use the NCAA cups, right?
Correct. That is kind of a pain, I will admit. That is not
no
easy.
other cups, just NCAA.
It's the only time each year that I'm nervous about, like someone jumping onto the table and then spilling water everywhere because
Right.
you're like drinking coffee. You're drinking water like you're drinking coffee.
Right.
Let me just have this little lid on this thing. Anyways, I always look so weird. I think. But yeah, they do such a good job with some of those details. I just wish they would apply that to the way to market the sport, because now this is a business now. We can turn this into a pretty cool conversation point where we're talking college sports in the middle of May when, listen, I love baseball. I came up through baseball calling games, but May baseball doesn't do it for me. October baseball, sign me up. May baseball, I want to talk about transactions in college.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to watch the Tigers opening day and it's snowing, and you're just like, all right, this is not baseball. What are we doing right now?
Hey, in fairness, it could snow in May. We all know that.
It's true.
True. I've got one more for you, and I know the other guys probably want to jump in too before we get you out of here. So we've talked about Ted. Obviously, I don't know if he told you in your guys' interaction. Ted called play-by-play for sports radio for over 30 years, and he called some of my games, called some of Jared's games, and countless other athletes in our area there in mid-Michigan. Kind of more on the local level, and luckily he's got some people that are continuing. Now that he's kind of sliding into retirement, and that's going to continue to go, and kind of along the lines, local news is kind of like drifting away. Sports radio on the smaller level for local sports, small town, is kind of starting to go away a little bit. And it's a shame. We love it. I mean, we talk about it a lot on this podcast. We love that stuff, supporting your athletes at the high school level. My question, though, is kind of your thoughts on that, because it makes me think the other day when UNC was playing Ole Miss, a bunch of my coworkers born and raised here in North Carolina, Carolina fans, Tar Heels through and through. This one guy, a little older, he went to school with Michael Jordan. He was at UNC with MJ, walking around campus with Dean Smith and Michael Jordan. He's got some pretty cool stories. But he comes into work, Tar Heels are on, and he's got his AirPods in, and he's listening to the local Tar Heels radio. And it made me appreciate that, because I remember growing up, my dad would sometimes mute the TV and turn on Frank Beckman. And he was like, I don't want to listen to Brent Musburger. I don't want to listen to whoever's. I want to listen to Frank Beckman. And I think there's still so much value in radio play-by-play, whether it's at the high school level or at the college level, even at the pro level. They still have, radio play-by-play for pro games. What are your kind of thoughts on that? Because obviously that's what you do. Do you still think that there's obviously a very big value outside of, if you're in your car, sometimes you got to turn on the radio to listen to a game. But, if you're just trying to consume a game and you want to listen to somebody like yourself who's a little more connected to Michigan basketball, not just some person who's been thrown onto a broadcast, kind of just your thoughts on like the value of traditional radio sports play-by-play.
Yeah, it's a great question. And first off, Ted, congrats on all you've accomplished. That's really,
Thanks.
really cool. And to me, that is at the core of all of this, right? Because I think about and listen, I will critique officials. I certainly did on a Sunday in Indianapolis recently, but you know, local high school sports, they have an officiating problem. They have a volunteer problem because these things do not make money like the NCAA tournament, but the NCAA tournament does not maximize itself without all of that and all of the passion coming from following the sport from a young age, playing the sport at a young age. I think it was such a misfire by Major League Baseball to condense all the minor league baseball stuff because there are now a bunch of kids who are nowhere close to any professional baseball. But it's a lot of times following the money. I know we're not going to have better ratings than CBS, right? I get that. If I have a game where I truly want to watch it, I'm going to watch or follow it, right? Digest it. I'm going to watch it on television. But I think where audio really factors in, and I'm a big podcast guy. So I'm going to add this one to the conveyor belt.
Yay.
But for me, if you are not watching or following or digesting a game with 100% attention, I'd rather listen to it on audio, have it in an AirPod while I'm working on the yard or doing stuff around the house or playing with our dogs and cats here in beautiful Ann Arbor, Michigan, right? Like to me, that has value. The other aspect is is great. I mean, Ian Eagle and company are going to do Friday and Sunday. I am going to get crushed in the tail of the tape head-to-head battle of play-by-play versus play-by-play because Ian's as good as it gets and he's a better dude. But Ian calls the game differently than we do.
Mm-hmm.
I try to keep it as unbiased as I can from a digest. Listen, if Michigan's losing by 15, I'm not going to tell you about how great, Trey Donaldson's 1 of 5 shooting is, right? That doesn't do anybody any help. But the passion you get, the analysis you get, the talking points you get are just different.
Yep.
And for me, again, I understand when people watch a game on TV. I do it all the time. What I'm always confused by is those who are just driving along and just listening to the TV call while they're not able to watch the TV call.
Oh, right.
And that's what I hope people will give us a chance on. And I'm super thankful for this team because it does feel like this team has allowed Terry and me to have some big moments that have gotten out there. And it's not about us at all. It's about the team. But I'm thankful that these players give us a chance to get excited. And I think it's been well received by fans. And that for me, if you were asking 18-year-old Brian, who was starting to call games for the Southern Ohio Copperheads, and if you know who that is or what sport it is or where they play, then, tip of the cap to you. But when I was doing that, all I wanted to do was call games that mattered with people listening. When I was calling, collegiate summer league wooden bat baseball and minor league baseball, we were mostly online only, and I'd finish a broadcast by my sign off was just thanks so much for listening. Because genuinely, if you were listening to a 15-minute post-game show on an internet-only feed of a Burlington Royals game, that I wanted to come to your home and give you a gift basket and a hug and tell you to reach out to me anytime, because there were plenty of instances where no one was listening. So that's what makes this special. That's what makes this fun. And for me, yeah, like, if we had 1 million listeners, but no one enjoyed it, that wouldn't be as good as if we had 5 listeners, but 3 of them enjoyed it, right? Like that's what we do this for. And it's when you get runs like this where I have nothing at all to do with it, it's pretty special because you've really hit the lottery in that regard.
I got one last question for you. Thank you for all your time. We'll keep it quick. Looking ahead to this weekend, I mean, the possibility of getting a Michigan versus Michigan State rematch is real, and it would be awesome. We recorded, maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point after the whole Spartan logo incident. I didn't love what Michigan did, but it seems like it really brought the team together since then. They haven't lost since. almost like a coach who will get a technical foul on purpose to maybe try to rally his team. One, what did you think of that incident dating back 2 weeks? And do you really think it maybe brought the team together a little bit?
I don't know if that brought the team together specifically. I do think that the opportunity to compete for something else reset things, and I think they just needed to. There's the whole Jim Harbaugh saying, "Oh, if you just pop one olive out, then all the olives come out." I think there's a little bit of that to what the Big Ten tournament proved to be. It also, again, helped with some of the matchups and how things went, and Michigan playing better. From the logo standpoint, you know, it's always. I'm not from the state of Michigan originally. I always find in-state rivalries to be so fascinating, especially in a state that has the pro sports teams that Michigan possesses, is that you could be sitting at Chrysler Center or the Breslin Center and sit next to somebody who is one's wearing maize and blue, one's wearing green and white. And then you could have those same two, and they would be, not liking each other, wouldn't conversate, anything like that. And then you could ship those exact same two people to Comerica Park or Ford Field, and they would have a great conversation, and they'd be wearing the same colors and all of it.
Right.
There's obviously a real passion. I think it's a rivalry that has the chance to be really, really special, and it's one that I was hoping that, it was a terrible way to get to this point, but I was really hoping that the aftermath of the shooting in East Lansing and that game in Chrysler, which was a very special moment, it was two communities coming together. I wish it would have helped things. It didn't last very long, unfortunately. So the incident, I think there were issues on both sides. I do think that, assuming that the head coach of a program who spent his last X number of years in the Southeast had the Michigan State traditions memorized. The reality is, no one goes in, if you're at this level of athletics, you're not going into a game thinking, well, hey, if we lose, we need to make sure we do this. No, we're bleeping winning that game. We don't care about that, right? The 16 seeds in the NCAA tournament, there's so much raw emotion from Mount St. Mary's head coach. Because even though no one had Mount St. Mary's over Duke in a bracket, the Mount St. Mary's team really believed they had a chance to win that game. Because you're competitive. You're that good. You are a collegiate athlete making the NCAA tournament. So, and the other thing I'll say too is, listen, Trey Holloman is a hell of a player. I love watching his game. If you think Trey Holloman was just politely asking Fat Brooks and LJ Kaysen to move off the logo without any sort of profanities, like I don't know what to tell you, right? He can uphold that tradition. All more power to him. All of it. I'm glad it stopped at just pushing and shoving. I liked how Dusty said, yes, we'll step back a little bit more next time, right? That's fine. What I will say about this weekend, it's going to be asked in pregame media availability on Thursday. Why? Because there were 5 questions to Danny Wolf about the potential of a Michigan-Yale game last weekend.
Right.
Oh, right.
That was a 5-13 matchup, right? Yale's one of the best mid-major programs in the country, but if you're talking about that, then yes, this is going to be brought up. And people have asked, well, do you want it? And what I'll say is this. I'm all for it, but I'll tell you this. With Michigan going and probably being outnumbered by Auburn, because Auburn fans could have planned for this a month ago. We knew Auburn was going to be a number 1 seed a month ago, and this is close to Auburn with being in Atlanta. Michigan fans always travel well, but they're going to be outnumbered on Friday. How much, we'll see. But if the 26-minute goes up on the clock as Michigan comes out on the court and Michigan State's walking off with their season over, having lost to Ole Miss, can you imagine the jolt of energy from those wearing maize and blue seeing the green and white leave that arena?
Woo.
Or
I'm just saying.
Or the other way. If Michigan State wins, that gives Michigan a little more juice too, right? Because it's like, we got to win, so we can go beat Michigan. I like either way, right?
Matt, this is not a player thing. I genuinely don't think the players at that point they need to focus on. I mean, Auburn. To me, Auburn's been better than Michigan State, and there have been very few teams better than Michigan State this year. Right. Michigan State, what they did, I tip my cap, right? Like there's nothing you can say from a Michigan standpoint for this year. Yeah, we can go back to insert matchup in the past. Of course, we can all do that. We all have that, right? But I don't think it matters for the players.
Yeah.
But for the fans, I do think there would be a bigger jolt of energy if Michigan State season's ending
Right.
while you are trying to knock off the number 1 seed in the entire tournament. If it gets to be a Sunday afternoon, which would be the 5:05 game on CBS,
Yes.
I promise you that. If it's Michigan State, spoiler alert,
Right.
that would be the atmosphere would be unlike any other. It'd be the biggest game in the
Insane.
history of the rivalry.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, from the fan standpoint,
Yeah.
if they're seeing a Hall of Fame coach head to the bench and head to the locker room with the season over, as your team's coming out, I would I'd be pretty fascinated by how that atmosphere would feel.
There'd be a lot of see you later.
Well, for our listeners that are listening and not watching, I'm sure they're getting chills by hearing that description of what could possibly happen. Hey, Brian, we appreciate all the time you've given us. So I'm going to end it with another quick 2-parter, and then we'll let you get out of here. Number one, the Trey Donaldson coast to coast. Did you sleep much that night at all? Because I know when I've done games that are just classic finishes, you're so juiced, it's hard to unwind. That's question one. And the other one is for my young guy that I brought on board, Casey Smith, and for other young broadcasters, you're still young, but what would you recommend them to do? I know I checked out some of your homework for games, and my philosophy always was you can never have too much homework. You might not use half of it, but at least you got it. Those 2 questions, will end it there.
Yeah, on the Trey thing, I'm glad that happened and kept me awake, because it was a pretty easy prep for Purdue, who we had played twice, and Maryland, who we had played 10 days ago. But it had been 102 days since we had seen Wisconsin, so that helped that I was jazzed up. I will say, because I was very happy with the call. Loved Terry's enthusiasm that he brought with it. I see why players can get lost in their press clippings, because I definitely read social media too many times when I should have been preparing for Wisconsin. So I do understand how guys are like, oh yeah, I how can this player be so excited about reading these stories about how awesome they are? Yeah, I did it. Like, that was a mistake on my part. I paid for it with sleep that night. I remember we got back from Indy about 1 a.m. Monday, and I just crashed. And then we had, we were leaving Tuesday for Denver. For young broadcasters, the one thing that I would say that I try to be a little bit different on, you'll hear this a lot in a lot of industries. Oh, it's about who you know. And that is true to an extent. But ultimately, it is about who knows you. You always want to put forth the best effort you can. You want to work hard in your broadcasting. You want to give your best. You want to have good preparation. Those are the prerequisites, right? There is no difference, I'm guessing, between my prep and Ted, your prep. And that doesn't, and I'm not any better of a broadcaster than I was last year, when no one was saying how, oh, what a great call by Brian and Terry. Well, yeah, Michigan was down by 35, right? It didn't matter. So all those are prerequisites. If you really want to climb in this industry, it's about the people who know you. And the comparison I use is, if you look at your phone, you go to the context, scroll all the way down, right? I think I have more than 1,000 numbers in my phone. How many do I really use? Mm-hmm. How many do I really call? If I can go up to a broadcaster or a decision maker in the industry, I can introduce myself, and then, hey, I know them, right? But if I then 6 months from now call them, are they going to answer? Are they going to want to talk? And that it means that is predicated on you building that relationship. You can always make introductions, and the people who don't want to talk, I disagree with those individuals, but there are people who just don't show interest, and that's okay. You're not going to bat 1,000. But those who do, if they're in a position you want to be in, or if they're a decision maker who you want them to decide on you, it is incumbent upon you to further that relationship and get to a point where they then know you. Because the people who really can help you in your life are the ones who, when they see your name pop up on the phone, they're excited about it.
Right.
And that's a difficult thing to do. So for me, it's about that. But yeah, all that stuff about preparation, about loving the job, about caring, about being on time, being willing to work. Those are all prerequisites. and there are a lot more really good broadcasters than there are opportunities. There are a ton more than 16 great play-by-play broadcasters who are out there
Right.
calling games on radio for basketball.
For
Just
sure.
because I'm doing it doesn't make me any better or worse than them. Just like in the same last year, I wasn't any better or worse than people who were getting to call those opportunities. So if you keep that mindset, I think it's easier to kind of compartmentalize and appreciate the good times when they come.
Well, Brian, I mean, this has been a really fun conversation. We appreciate you taking out the time. We know you got stuff to do and get ready for, a couple more Michigan wins. But before you move on, tell us, you were talking about your podcast. Tell our listeners, where to follow you, what other information you can pass on.
Yeah, the biggest project we have that's kind of on demand is M Go Blue podcast. John Jansen and I do In the Trenches, which is a football specific Michigan podcast. I handle Defend the Block, which is all things basketball, and then Conquering Heroes is produced by me, hosted by John. We talk to a different coach each and every week. Great conversation this week with Kevin Connery. Michigan men's lacrosse just knocked off the #1 team in the country. We understand that football and basketball are the kings of Ann Arbor. But it is amazing spotlighting some of the other stories in and around Michigan athletics, because to be able to accomplish all that Michigan has in the sports that don't get as much spotlight, I think I get maybe just as much, if not more, fulfillment from doing that show than I do the other two. So definitely encourage people to check it out, M Go Blue Podcast. And you can follow me on X at Brian Boesch, spelled as everyone would have totally guessed, Boesch. Yeah, my ancestors really wanted to mess with me when it came to social media branding.
Well, best of luck, and we really appreciate it again. And go Blue.
Go Blue. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah,
Brian.
good
That was
deal.
awesome,
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Enjoy Atlanta.
Yeah, no doubt. I hope to
Hopefully-
see you guys in San Antonio. All right.
Yeah, I was
There
going to
you
say,
go.
hopefully you're there all weekend, right?
I want to be busy. Absolutely. But no, if I can ever help down the road, please let me know. Happy to do it.
Appreciate it. We'll stay in touch. Thanks,
All right.
Brian.
Be well.
Yeah.
Take the time, man.